desert in the great American Southwest. Good evening and or good morning, wherever you may be across this great land of ours, from Guam, out across the state line, all the way east to the Caribbean and the U.S. Virgin Islands, where I'm going to go visit one day, south into South America, north all the way to the pole. This is Coast to Coast AM, worldwide, of course, on the Internet. Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to do something a little different. First, you may recall, I think it was the end of last week. Yes, it was, Saturday morning. I read you a story that was faxed to me by somebody in Columbia, Missouri, and I thought it incredible. The story is entitled, Kansas City Man Tries to Build Time Machine on Porch. Now, in case you don't remember the general tenure of the article, I'm going to remind you now. Kansas City Associated Press. When a Missouri factory worker set out to make a time machine on his back porch, the contraption he came up with was not completely off the mark, theoretically, according to scientists. For the high-voltage electrical transformer that Michael Markham had hooked up to two vertical metal rods would more likely have killed him or blown up his house than carried him into the past or future. Time travel, though enticingly possible in the mathematics of Einstein's theory of relativity, is not likely in the physical universe, they say. They go on, quote, it is a very interesting area, though. There are theoretical physicists working on those areas, and I will not say that it's total nonsense. This was according to the chairman at the physics department at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. But he went on, it's not something that you can demonstrate with batteries. And I guess that was Michael's problem. So are the Stanberry police, who say the voltage that Markham had diverted into the contraption caused power interruptions in and around the northwest Missouri town of about 1,300. Markham had connected the metal rods to the terminals of a transformer, one of 6 stolen from a utility company, in hopes of creating a large spark gap with ascending electrical arcs. Markham was arrested January 29th on a felony charge of stealing the transformers from a St. Joseph light and power generating station in King City. He pleaded guilty last month, was placed on 5 years probation. Police said the transformers had a capacity of 12 to 76,000 volts each, enough to easily cause electrocution or an explosion. Markham, who told police that he has 2 years of college-level electrical engineering, said he was building a time machine, but didn't have enough power for it. That's according to the Stanberry police chief, Tom Hampton. Hampton said, quote, he's not nuts. He appears to be an intelligent person with a lack of common sense. Maybe. Hampton said Markham told officers he had not tried to enter the spark gap, and neither had anyone else. If anyone had, they probably would have been electrocuted, not transported in time. Presumably, he decided that if he got enough electricity together, he could build a time machine, because there is the concept that if you're going to do it, it's going to require an enormous amount of energy. So there it was, and you know me, and these kinds of stories, and how I'm fascinated by time. So I set out to find young Mr. Markham, and I found him.
Some velvet morning when I'm straight, I'm gonna open up your gate and maybe tell you about Phaedra and how she gave me life and how she made it in some velvet morning when I'm straight.
Flowers growing on a hill, dragonflies and daffodils, learn from us very much. Look at us, but do not touch. Phaedra is my name.
Northwest is full of mysteries, from Bigfoot to ghost stories and, of course, the disappearance of D.B. Cooper.
Another mystery buried deep in the hills of eastern Washington keeps resurfacing. A bottomless pit said to be a pathway to the paranormal. Como 4's Denise Whitaker heads east in search of the hole.
Ellensburg and its surrounding valleys and Menashtash Ridge are beautiful in any season, but some believe what lies beneath is a deep, dark hole with supernatural powers. one of the only people alive ever known to have seen this mysterious hole, took me as far as he could or would.
Oh, honey, don't go up that damn driveway.
I want to see if there's tracks up here. I'm just curious.
You're out of your tree going up there.
Red Elk, a Native American shaman or medicine man, tells me his dad first showed him the hole in 1961.
He said, this is an endless hole.
He says he's been back many times and that strange things happen every time he goes near it.
And people get it confused with what I call the devil's hole.
Many locals claim to know about the hole, but it didn't really become a phenomenon until 1997, when Mel Waters went on the Coast to Coast radio show with Art Bell.
As usual, I brought the dogs with me. They wouldn't go anywhere near the damn thing.
Waters said the hole had a 3-foot stone wall around it. It seemed bottomless to him, so he used an old shark fisherman's trick, sending thousands of feet of fishing line down.
What I did is I sent down a roll of lifesavers.
Lifesavers?
Yeah, so when it hits the water, the lifesavers will dissolve.
But the lifesavers came back up whole, no water. So how deep was this hole? Waters said he believed it descended miles into the earth, and he says he's heard strange stories about its powers.
The one guy claims that he threw his departed canine down into the hole. He swears the dog actually came back to him.
When Mel went public, that's when the trouble began.
But why?
Now I'm going public on this.
Red Elk claims the government has a secret base there.
It's an underground base, a very small underground base.
That's how Red Elk explains white boxes covering the area on some satellite images. Is the government covering something up? Red Elk says he's also witnessed alien activity at the hole.
A huge spacecraft, one, will appear and hover over the hole.
That, he says, happens during summer solstice.
They unload and then they load, and then they take off. God help the things that they load.
Alien spacecraft? Dogs that come back to life? I went to the Northwest Museum of Legends and Lore seeking some answers.
Well, I believe there is a hole.
But Philip Lipson's never seen the hole, even though he's led expeditions to find it.
Well, I think it's actually a true event, just something that's never really been totally uncovered.
And to this day, no one's been able to find it since that famous radio conversation.
It was mildly sensational, and then it just mushroomed, completely out of control.
Allensburg Public Library historian Milton Waggy says the phone rang off the hook with all kinds of stories about the hole, some explainable, some not. He's still trying to solve the mystery of what happened to the library's file on Mel's hole.
Well, it just disappeared, which lends itself to the mysteriousness of Mel's hole. You know, did Mel take it? Did it just sort of rise out of the locked file cabinet? You never know. You know, there might be a hole out there.
Question is, can any of us find it?
Welcome to Dreamland, a program dedicated to an examination of areas in the human experience not easily nor neatly put in a box. Things seen at the edge of vision, awakening a part of the mind as yet not mapped, and yet things every bit as real as the air we breathe but don't see. This is Dreamland. This indeed is Sunday evening, and Dreamland underway once again. Hi everybody, I'm Art Bell. Great to be here on a Sunday evening. As you know, one of my favorite areas of investigation, without question.
On May 23, 1997, Victor gave a radio interview on the nationally syndicated show Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. Speaking by telephone from an unknown location, Victor answered questions from host Art Bell and his guest, UFO expert Sean Morton.
From the Kingdom of Nye, Coast to Coast AM continues with Art Bell.
It is going to be a very interesting morning. Let's see if we've got Victor on the line. Victor, are you there?
I'm here.
Welcome to the program, Victor.
Afterwards, this is what Bell and Morton had to say about Victor's credibility.
What a hell of an interview, huh?
Boy, oh boy, talk about making history on the radio. It was, as far as I could tell, he answered every question properly as far as exactly where the locations are, to the, descriptions of the, the transports, the 737s, to the CTS-43s, the retinal scans, the 5 levels at S4.
A veteran of countless controversial interviews, Art Bell still found himself impressed by his encounter with Victor.
In the first, I think, half hour, I sensed that I was getting a kind of a runaround, or that I was not satisfied with the quality of the answers that I was being given. But as the interview progressed, and Victor, to some degree, began to relax, I began to get a different sense, and that was that he was telling me the truth. I think Victor was scared. I think Victor really is scared. And so my judgment of the interview after about the first, maybe 20 minutes, half hour, is that we began to get some real information. It was a significant milestone. There's no question about that in broadcasting.
You removed the soundtrack from the tape before you turned it over to this program.
That's correct. I can't allow the voices of the project personnel to be heard by the general public. There's a very good chance their family or friends on the outside might recognize them.
Isn't your purpose in releasing this tape to expose Area 51 to the world?
My purpose is to expose the existence of the aliens, not compromise these individuals. I made the decision to come forward. I'm taking precautions to protect my own identity, and I don't think it's fair for me to put these others in danger of exposure. In any case, the interview on the tape went nowhere. It was interrupted, as you'll see.
Can you describe for us what we're seeing?
All right, we're looking at the interview suite at S4. It's kept dark for the comfort of the aliens. The figure who is just barely visible in the left foreground is the telepath, and behind the camera is a raked seating area for observers. Although in this case, I believe the only other person present was a military aide. The alien is seated behind a glass partition in a biocontainment area, which is maintained at Biosafety Level 2, the lowest designation. That's primarily for the protection of the aliens, not us. The theory is that if they were going to infect us with an alien bug, it would have happened 50 years ago. In fact, all the indications are the aliens eliminated microbial and viral life from their own ecosystem long ago. They aren't susceptible to our diseases directly, but it has been shown that microbes can reproduce and form colonies within their respiratory systems, which tends to exacerbate the debilities they seem to suffer anyway in our environment. In fact, you can see here the alien is beginning to flag. The interview was not going well. The telepath was trying to clarify some points from a previous interview, but he wasn't receiving coherent responses. As you can see, the being is in real distress. At this point, the telepath is sending out a message to the medical staff. He's trying to communicate with the alien, but he's getting no response. There's very little he can do. There's no direct connection between his space and the biocontainment area. That's the aide stepping in on the right. The medical staff should be there by now. They're slow in responding. there they are. I have to say the medical personnel at S4 are less than first-rate. They tend to be selected for their willingness to keep secrets rather than their medical competence. By the way, he's not shining that light into the eyes. It looks that way, but in fact he's checking for hemorrhaging around the eye sockets and in the nasal cavity. I'm sorry. It's very hard for me to watch this.
Did modern ufology really begin about 1947?
Yeah, it really did with the Ken Arnold sightings. But now there's been a lot that happened before that. There was a recovery, I think, in 1941. I think in Arizona, and there was a lot of activity during World War II. But really, modern ufology started in 1947 with the recovery. Well, first with Ken Arnold sighting up in Seattle, I think it was, and then the recovery of the craft in Roswell, New Mexico.
I'm sure you know all the questions that people would ask if I started picking up phone lines now. So what about being inside that craft? What do people generally ask, and how do you respond?
Well, first of all, is the overall description inside. Entering the craft is, like I said, certainly uncomfortable for an adult human being.
You realize that you're not in a place that was designed for humans.
Exactly. And it certainly is different from anything that you're familiar with. And what I mean to say about that is everything is basically one color. Normally, any area you're surrounded in is always different textures, different colors, so on and so forth. The inside of the craft is essentially all a dull pewter aluminum color, very metallic looking. Mm-hmm. There are no sharp right angles anywhere, and the description I've given before is basically the craft looks like it was just injection molded, essentially like the model was. There are no seams anywhere. Everything inside the craft looks like it was fashioned out of wax, heated for a short time, and then cooled to where everything basically melted into what was next to it, what it was sitting on. That's about the best description I can give as to how the inside looked.
Seamless.
Seamless and very unusual. Again, no right angles anywhere.
Laying there, he realized that this was not a human being at all.
Not a human.
And he described it very similar as to what the girl described, a creature that was about almost 5 feet in length, with a large head, a thin neck, brown, oily colored skin, no body hair, no facial hair, no mustache, a tiny little nose.
And he gave it to you in that detail?
Yeah, in that detail. And, I'm glad you asked that, because at this point, his demeanor began to change, and you had to sit there as a witness and watch this to completely understand the emotion now that was filling the room, because it was only a short time after this. I mean, it was easy to realize these weren't rumors. He was the guy.
Yeah, I've got it. But in terms of this wasn't human, but apparently it had what we would think of as a leg, and it was obvious that there was a bone.
Yeah,
so that
it was a broken leg with the bone sticking out through the skin.
So we know already that the metabolism is fairly similar to that of human beings in some ways, right? The construction.
Yeah, we went through a lot of detail, which I don't have time to go into at all, but I'll mention a few things. I asked him about the blood and the bone. I said,
right.
What's the blood like? Is it blue and, jumps around on the floor or what?
Yes.
And he said, no, the blood is very similar to human blood, even with the cellular constituents. With one large exception was that there's a set of little small white cells called platelets. And the platelet reading, he said, was about 10,000 times higher than in human blood.
Wow.
And that it clotted almost immediately as it came out of the blood vessel. But he didn't know whether this was due to increased platelets or whether the blood was being exposed to an atmosphere that was different than where this thing had come from. He said the bone was, again, very similar to human bone, except it was a little more pink in color. And then it contained what is called medically lacunae. And these are holes or apertures that are in the bone. He said it almost looked like osteoporotic bone, which in human is a diseased bone, which the calcium drops out and has holes in it. But he said because of these internal lacunae or holes or apertures in the bone,
yes,
the tensile strength of the bone was much, much stronger than human bone. And, he knew that what he had to do was to, of course, put the bone back, set the fracture, and so on.
Then after midnight under starry satellite skies, I lie awake taking in the cover-up talk. Can't stop, did I hear that right? Live conversations, beaming out to us all in the dark. Real life phone line, all their experts. What in the world, things are falling apart. Coast to coast, to the average Joe, it may be hard to tell. Oh well, I was on close. Yeah, the truth is out there. Ask God, where Area 51. Aliens and laser guns. Oh, government flies, shows and lies. Spinning right out of control. Conspiracy radio. Conspiracy radio. Critics say how it's just a phase. Don't you worry, its days will end. It's all hype when they spin it just right, making foes of the public friends. They dare ask, what do you believe? A bullet going bump in the night. Cloak and dagger, media swagger, the writing on the wall. Is it wrong? Is it right? Coast to coast, to the average Joe, it may be hard to tell. Oh well, I'll listen close, 'cause the truth is out there. Ask God, where Area 51. The heard it all? Who took the fall? There's a strange smell in the air. It's the devil you do or the devil you don't. It's a threat you must beware. Coast to coast, to the average Joe, maybe hard to tell. Oh well, I'll let us close. But the truth is out there, I've got every affair. Dear woman, aliens and laser guns, a government ties to wars and lies, spinning right out of control. Conspiracy radio, cold. The average show, maybe hard to tell. Oh well, I'll let us close. But the truth is out there, I've got everywhere. Coast to coast. But the truth is out there. Coast to coast. But the truth is out there. Shouldn't be snowing in the middle of the summer. Alright. Lights are on. No lights. What's going on? What's that sound?
But this was a little different. She took off and she was barking, really, really barking. There was an anger to the tone. And she went up a hill in front of me, and I lost sight of her, and I could still hear the barking going on. And the barking changed from just chasing something to almost being involved or being mauled by something. And at that point I thought it's either a cat or a bear. And so I dropped my backpack, I grabbed a branch that was alongside of the trail, and I ran to the top of the ridge where I saw my dog involved with a fight with a creature. And what I saw was a vibrating, undulating surface that looked about the size of a small child, but yet it wasn't a child. And it was vibrating so fast that I could not see a definite outline of this being. I could just barely make out the shape as if it was a vibrating shadow. My dog had a hold of its arm, its left arm, and was tearing at its left arm. And as I witnessed this, all of a sudden I saw this thing like start to tear the head off of my dog, literally tearing her head, her jaws apart, ripping her skull right in half. And at that moment, that thing turned around and looked at me, stopped vibrating for a moment, and then turned back and continued to do this. And I lunged forward, took that club or branch, and swung as hard as I could and knocked that thing about 4 or 5 feet back.
In August of 1997, two very experienced investigators were on this ridge that overlooked the property. They were up there specifically to monitor an area where those stuff had been happening in the previous weeks. So they were there with a purpose, and they had their equipment. Nothing had happened pretty well all night up till about 2 a.m. and they were just packing up. They were looking down at the area just before heading off home, when one of them spotted a dull yellow light. It looked like a sort of a small reflection off glass near the ground, that kind of thing. Nothing to notice. But then it started getting bigger and bigger, and so they decided, okay, well, let's unpack the equipment and have a look. So one guy took his camera out that had infrared film in it. The other person took a pair of Generation 3 night vision binoculars out of the bag and started monitoring what was going on. Through the night vision binoculars, he saw this three-dimensional
tunnel, the actual light that had expanded to about 4 feet in diameter now through his night vision binoculars looked like a three-dimensional tunnel. And in the tunnel he saw movement. Now at the same time, the guy who was taking photographs could only see this 4-foot diameter dull yellow light down there. He could not see this three-dimensional tunnel. And through this tunnel, this large black humanoid was crawling. It crawled out actually through the tunnel, got out of the tunnel, and vanished into the night. It literally used the shoulders to emerge from the tunnel. And this guy was watching this through night vision binoculars.
Computations for Saturn and a lot of other things there. And in 1856, he presented the Royal Astronomical Society with his idea that was
then Larry Arthur, who was a landlord, I guess, for Dr. Reed, and Sean Alonti, who is a MUFON member and has had a lot of contact with these gentlemen. So, in addition to that, I have Dr. Reed's entire history here, and so I'll try to get to as much of all of this
when
as we can.
Simon Newcomb, Admiral Simon Newcomb, who was the, here we go again, the U.S. Navy admiral, the head of the Naval Observatory there in Washington, D.C., he goes over to Paris, and with no facts or figures or arguments, he discredits Peter Andreas Hansen and says that that's not true, that there couldn't be anybody on the moon.
After Dark, my monthly newsletter, will tell you. After Dark will tell you about the conspiracies the government will not. After Dark will reveal the discoveries that scientists will not. After Dark,
astronomers that say, absolutely, there is probably somebody up there. But whoever's in charge of what's going on down here, we're not allowed to know that. And so there's been an effective, the Apollo mission was really
the mind-bending new millennium. It's a 2-hour audio cassette, and guess what? It features 2 of my most controversial guests. First, Gordon Michael Scallion. Are his alarming predictions for the new millennium real? And second, of course, Major Ed Dames. He uses remote viewing to see the past, present, and future.
In
this
orbit
tape is
to hold weapons like I told you about, destroyed the World Trade Center.
Call 1-888.
Midnight in the desert, shooting stars across the sky. This magical journey will take us on a ride, filled with the longing, searching for the truth. Will we make it till tomorrow? Will the sun shine on you? Midnight in the desert, and we're listening. Ooh, we're listening to you. Midnight in the desert, and there's wisdom in the air. I've been looking for the answers all my life. I felt you there. As the world we live in quickens, are we heeding all the signs? Have we lost our intuition? Are we running out of time? Midnight in the desert, and we're listening. Ooh, we're listening to you. And we're listening. Ooh, we're listening to you.
Now, I've got a clean copy of it now, and I warn you, this could scare you. Here's the email. Dear Art Bell, I just recently began listening to your radio show and could not believe it when you talked about the sounds from hell tonight. My uncle had told me this story a couple of years ago, and I didn't believe him. Like one of your listeners who discounted the story as nothing more than just a religious newspaper fabricated account. The story about the digging of the hole and the hearing of the sounds from hell is very real. It did occur in Siberia. My uncle collected videos and audio tapes and so forth on the paranormal, supernatural. He passed away fairly recently, but he would have loved your show. He let me listen to one of the audio tapes that he had on the sounds from hell in Siberia, and I copied it. He received his copy from a friend who worked at the BBC. It took me a while to find it tonight, but attached is that sound from my uncle's tapes. It's not the greatest quality, but the sounds are there. I was very hesitant to send you this, as the sound bothers me to listen to. I'd suggest that if you do play it on the program, warn listeners in advance so they may have the option of turning the radio off for 30 seconds while it plays. It has always haunted me. To those who discounted the Siberia sounds from hell story, it is true, and I, for one, wish it wasn't. Rick, listening from Chicago. And so I submit now the cleaned, a better copy to you, and I warn you, what you're about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
He's now heard on 437 stations in the United States and Canada. He's on the internet worldwide. He has approximately 12 million listeners. He's on all night long. 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. are his broadcast hours. Many times you hear him late at night, in the early hours of the morning, late evening. He's on. Where did all this start? Where did you come from suddenly?
I came from the world of rock and roll. I was in radio for, Larry, about 20 years.
A jock.
A jock. That's right. And then I finally got out, up and down the dial. You know, I got fed up with the whole gypsy existence, and I left radio. And I went and I worked in microwave for about 6 years, and I built a cable company. And then I got bored. Have you ever tried to stay away from this?
Yeah, well, it's impossible, isn't it?
It's impossible.
So why come back in as an all-night host? Or is that the way you came back in?
There was a radio station, a 50,000-watt station in Las Vegas, and one day they came to me as I worked in cable, and they said, gee, wouldn't you like to do a little talk radio again? How about doing, a little weekend work? And that was the beginning of the end. I was sucked back in. Pretty soon, there I am doing a daytime show, asking, this 50,000-watt station covers about 13 states at night. I'd love to have a shot at that. And they gave me a shot. And I did that for 10 years, and then we began syndication, and here I am today. So I was sucked back into radio.
Why all night?
You did an all-night show, too.
I started this.
You began that way, right?
Yeah.
I love all night, and I would never leave it, and I think there's something special about the nighttime and nighttime people.
How did you get into, for want of a better term, the bag you got into of things occultish?
Evolution.
Things different.
Evolution. A slow evolution. I didn't do it quickly. These are things that fascinate me. Absolutely fascinate me. So I would slowly inject them as I was doing radio programs, and I found the audience reacted well. I enjoyed doing it. The ratings reflected the fact that it was working, and so it was a slow evolution.
Do you think it works more at night than, say, if you were doing the same thing at...
I don't think it would work at all during the day.
Because?
Not a chance. Because nighttime people are different. When nighttime comes, the buzz of the day slows down, the phones aren't ringing, you're not going crazy in the office. You have time to sit down and think about esoteric things.
And the attention span's greater.
Much greater.
Let's run down some things. You believe aliens have abducted some people on this planet?
I believe it's possible.
You believe Whitley Strieber?
I do. Whitley's a good friend.
Crop circles?
Undeniable. Doug and Dave with a chain and board? Well, yes, that accounts for some of them. Not 10-acre crop circles with 192 rings.
Ghosts?
Absolutely.
People call about ghosts?
All the time.
They hear them? See them?
Yes. Here it is. This is, my audience will understand what this is. What you have in your hand is bismuth and magnesium. And it is from Roswell. This is ostensibly from the crash at Roswell, New Mexico. This has been examined by just about every rare metals, exotic metals manufacturer in the country. It's been to Sandy. It's been to all the great labs of the country. Nobody knows how it's made. Nobody knows how it's kept together. It should be pure dust. Nobody knows where it came from. Most likely explanation, it was put together in space. Now, what you're holding in your hand is impossible. That bismuth and magnesium could be put together is simply impossible. Now, by the way, we had it tested at Carnegie in Washington, and I forget the type of radiation, but it's 60 times normal, so you might want to put it back.
I think that's a good idea. And what do I do with this?
You take it home and you put it up in the closet somewhere.
And someday. Anyway, let's go.
You are about to have your last child, right?
Las Vegas, Nevada. Hello.
Las Vegas.
Hi, Larry. Hi, Art.
Hi.
Mr. Bell, I would like to ask you if you feel the world, or the U.S. in particular, is responsible enough to handle the knowledge of extraterrestrials.
I think that a lot of people, probably like yourself, are responsible enough to handle the information. But I think that if 10 or 20% of the people are not responsible enough to handle it, then unfortunately you may recall that in our own revolution it takes a very small percentage of people to not be capable of handling the situation for it to get out of control.
And that is usually the reason given by the believers as to why the government doesn't want to tell you.
Well, there was something called the Brookings Report, Larry, which said essentially that religious institutions and all the other great institutional beliefs that we have would very likely crumble if we found out that we are not who we thought we were.
Wouldn't you guess most people would like to hear that? That there's something else out there? Wouldn't you guess that?
Most people believe there is something else out there, but I'm not sure that they want to hear that our ancestors were little gray guys.
I was listening to your show last night, Art, and you were talking to Whitley about the material that you showed Larry this evening.
That's right.
And I have two questions.
Sure.
One is, can you tell us where you obtained the material?
Yes, it was sent.
Leave it in the glass and put it back.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It was sent to me. This was sent to me by a source in South Carolina, a military source, who claimed that his grandfather retrieved it from Roswell. And I've got all that paperwork.
For the benefit, that's an unidentified flying object supposed to have landed with bodies, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, second question, ma'am?
And the second question is, why is the government covering up so much about Roswell?
Well, the answer to that might be why they're covering up so much about a lot of things, and that is that the answers to things like this may lead to explanations that the government is not ready for us to have, and that we may not, in all honesty, be ready ourselves.
This is a material not on this Earth.
All indications are that this was not made on Earth, could not have been made on Earth. The best exotic labs in this country have tried to reproduce it, and they have not done so.
What happened in Paris?
I talked to a lot of people about out-of-body experiences. They're called OBEs. And I've been to the edge of an OBE before, Larry. Have you ever been in bed, sort of lying there, and you feel a kind of a vibration and a buzzing begin? Sometimes you snap out of it, and you feel like you're falling. Almost everybody's had that experience.
Or you can't get up.
Or you can't get up. Or you're paralyzed. Well, that's the beginning of an OBE, Larry. And I've been there several times, and I'm a control freak. You know, I do a radio show, and I do my own board, and I control everything. I control the phones. And I'm a control freak, so I would never let it go. But I went to Paris with my wife, and all of a sudden, I wasn't doing a radio show every day. I didn't have a deadline. I relaxed. I let my guard down. And I was lying in bed, awake, and instantly, with acceleration that I can only describe as incredible, but you didn't feel it as though the lips pressing back, you know, going up in the shuttle, I was above Paris in what I can only describe as total ecstasy. There are really not words to describe what I felt. And it surprised me.
You weren't in the body.
No, absolutely not. It shocked me so much that I snapped right back into my body. Right back into my body. And here's something you don't do. I was so excited. I was so shocked that I woke my wife up. And I said, guess what happened to me? I said, and then I told her the whole story. Don't do that. Don't wake up your wife to tell her that kind of
wagons, right? Well, couldn't it have been, though, you flew over Paris, you having a dream sequence? Because in dreams, you fly into anything.
I have dreams every other day, every week. I know what dreams are. This was no dream. I was out of my body.
Do you remember going back into it?
It was instantaneous. And the reason I went back so quickly, I believe, there was no warning that it was coming. It was utterly spontaneous because I had my guard down. And I snapped back into my body because I was so shocked at what had occurred.
Which leads you to think what? All right, that plus this equals means.
Well, it may not mean anything. It may be that our brains, in other words, it's a function of a living human brain. Does it mean, somebody told me that's as close as you're ever going to be to death? And I don't know if that's true. I don't know that that means there's life after death. So you see, I really am a skeptic. But it may mean that it's a function of my living human brain.
Some people near death report things like that, right?
Absolutely.
That when they don't die and they come back.
Absolutely. But short of one a couple thousand years ago, nobody's come back after 3 or 4 days to tell us, you know.
I've never. You know, you got a new book out, right, called The Source.
The Source.
Journey Through the Unexplained. In fact, there we see its cover. When you got into this, did you become a believer or a reporter?
I'm still a reporter. I don't think you could call me a believer. And everybody's always asking for proof. Do you believe in aliens? Well, I believe they could be here. Are they here? No, I can't say that.
But a lot of your callers describe it, right?
Of course. I've interviewed abductees. I've interviewed doctors who have taken implants out of people's hands and other parts of their body. So sure.
Now, if you question it, do you believe that they believe it? How do you separate that from the charlatan?
That some of them believe it. How do I separate it? I don't. In other words, I assume that my audience is made up of adult people. And so I present them with hard science. I present them with soft stories. And I allow them to make the decision.
This all of it, Art, then, from your standpoint, has been self-educated to you, right? In other words, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have said, I have this wild interest in UFOs.
Not a chance.
So the audience developed it for you? I mean, were you taking calls one night?
I'll tell you what developed it for me. I saw one. That's what really developed it for me.
What did you see?
Fortunately, I was not by myself. I was with my wife, and this was during the time when I was commuting from my home to Las Vegas, a 65-mile one-way drive, 120 miles every day.
You live remote.
I live in well, as a matter of fact, do you remember when you did that show, sitting out, desk like this in the middle of the desert?
Never forget it.
Never forget it.
TNT
Area
special
51?
for 2 hours.
I live
Area
just over
51.
That's
You
right.
live near there?
I live just over the mountain from that
There's
area.
nothing near there.
I've always wondered, when you were sitting there, was it getting colder and
Whoa,
colder?
colder.
I thought
Well,
so.
we started in the afternoon. By the time it got to be night, I was freezing to death. And it was, but there's nothing there. I mean,
Nothing there.
You wait for the lights of Vegas. Where could you possibly live there?
Well, I can see the lights of Vegas just barely from where I live. They kind of light up one little segment of the sky. Otherwise, it's clear, beautiful. The stars are a million deep. The Milky Way is from one side all the way to the other side.
You broadcast from there?
I do.
From your house?
From home.
All right. What do you see that night? What's happening?
All right. I'm on the way back from Las Vegas. And we're probably about a quarter mile from home. To give you the setting, it's almost a full moon. It's quiet. It's so quiet that you can hear crickets at a quarter mile. That quiet. We're on the last leg on the way home, and my wife said, "What the hell is that?" She was in the passenger seat, and she caught something coming up from behind. I said, "I don't know." And I pulled the car over to the side of the road. We both got out, and here coming up from behind us, at about, I would guess, 150 feet, is a triangular object with 3 lights on it, 3 solid lights on it. One, I believe, was strobing in the front. It had to be about 150 feet from one point of the triangle to the next. It was monstrous. And
how far off the ground?
About 150 feet. It looked so big and so close that I could have thrown a rock at it.
No kidding. You scared?
No, scared is not the right word. We watched it come up from behind us, Larry. And it came directly over our heads. Close Encounters of the Stars and the moon went away. And it made no sound. As it passed over our heads, you could hear the crickets at a quarter mile, Larry. Still, no propulsion, no noise, going, I guess, about 30 miles an hour. I was in the Air Force. I know what aerodynamic flight requires. And trust me, this thing was defying gravity.
Of course, the explanation would be that's an experimental Air Force base that's secret to everyone, and that probably is something they're working on.
Then, maybe so. But if we have anti-gravitic craft, that's almost as big a story as if they are here.
This defied the law of gravity.
Absolutely. 30 miles an hour, floating, not flying. And we watched it, we stood and we watched it go over the valley for about 5 minutes, kind of with our mouths on, open.
Why did that not make you a believer that there is something somewhere else?
It did make me a believer that there are things that we don't know about. Now, it could be ours, it could be theirs, but the way I figure it, either way, it's a big, big story.
Yeah, if it's ours, it's a big story. If it's theirs, it's
If it's ours and we have anti-gravity, it's a big story.
Mm-hmm.
And they're keeping a lot from us. They developed the F-117 Stealth up there. Well, what have they been doing since?
You're into things different, right? Would you say, is that correct way?
No, I don't think so. I think that what I'm into is part of life. I think it's as much of the things that you can't touch, the things that you're not sure of, they're as much a part of our life as the air that we're breathing right now. It's just that a lot of people don't notice. They don't take the time.
You don't screen the calls, right?
I don't screen
I didn't either for all those. I've never screened a call till television.
Is that right?
Yeah, but it's fun, much more fun. Why
It is.
screen a call?
My view is that if the talk show host is talented enough, that you can take any call, no matter how strange, how weird, and make it fun, entertaining, informational, something or another. It's just, I enjoy I don't want to know what's coming.
Certainly, neither do I. Much more spontaneous. Right?
Absolutely.
Well, the screener screens, but I don't want to know what the subject is. All I want to know, all I ever want to know is the city. That's the only thing that mattered. But you, in other words, when I hear your show, it's a happening, right? It's happening then. Nobody has filtered anything.
That's right. A lot of times, I will obviously prepare. I spend about as much time preparing and knowing the news that I end up not talking about, and whatever it is that I've got prepared to talk about half the time or better.
Do you set a subject, or can anybody call on anything?
Anybody can call in anything. And believe me, that's what I get. I get time travelers. I get people claiming to be immortal. I get some pretty strange people.
We'll
but
get to
they're
that.
fun.
What's it like to broadcast out of your house?
You know, I used to commute taking about 2 hours of my time every single day.
To a Vegas station?
And I thought that when I came home, when they built the studio in my home, I said, hey, guys, how about building a studio in my home? And they did. And I thought, great, I buy back 2 hours of my life. Wrong. Now everybody knows where to find me. And so it's work from the moment I get up until I actually go to bed. Because everybody knows where to find me. Before I had those 2 solitary hours to drive back and forth. That's right. That's right.
Also, isn't it kind of weird to be broadcasting? I'd feel weird broadcasting out of where I sleep.
Well, I don't sleep in there. I sleep on the other side of the house.
But I mean, it's the same area, right?
It's a converted bedroom.
Hello, Art Bell.
Hi there.
I'm an Art Bell addict. I wish you'd do a program on Art Bell addiction. But I also wondered, what do you think might be the connection between Stonehenge and the Miami Circle? Is it the same type of sighting, but just smaller stones?
All right. The lady refers to a circle. There's a developer named Bauman down in Miami. The poor fellow, I kind of feel sorry for him. He had a $100 million project. He began clearing the land in Miami for this $100 million project, and they found what appears to be a sacred circle. And they had the bull...
Just like a chalk or a circle of what?
A circle that resembles in some ways Stonehenge. And it was about to be plowed under. The big D9 cats were sitting there, and they were about to do it. And we began a campaign trying to save it. And they went to court with eminent domain, and I'll be damned if they haven't saved it. So we had kind of a phone thing going to try to save the Miami Circle.
For what reason?
Because we don't know what it is, Larry. And to plow this thing down, this thing that could be extremely old, very old, ancient, tell us a lot about who we are in our own beginnings. You just don't bring in a bulldozer in.
But what did Bauman do?
Well, I don't think he's a real happy camper about all of that. But we need a little time. I want some time to study
these kind of things, so we know more about why we're here, who we are.
Who we are. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what all this is about.
It's what everything is about. By the way, there's one other elegant explanation for the possibility of God. I talked to you about the God part of the brain. That's one idea. Another idea is that there was, our nation's best theoretical physicists, like Dr. Kaku, who I frequently interview, believe in the Big Bang. In other words, there was something. There was something. Sure, you bet. Something smaller than a quark, which we can't even measure right now and find, suddenly became all that is. Well, that doesn't work for me. In my imagination, I can't imagine something that small becoming all that now is, and frankly, they can't explain it either. So, imagine, Larry, that there's an entity. Before there's anything, before there's time or space, there's an entity. This entity is alone. This entity, in effect, blows itself up, and now becomes all that is, including you. So God is within all of us. Elegant.
Who made the entity? We'll be back.
I have a simple question to ask you, okay?
All right.
Everybody's always saying, well, where's the proof? People that claim it's a fantastic story that they've been abducted and the implants put in them, okay? Now, when they've removed these implants and they've been identified as material that is not of this world, then doesn't that tell you simply right then and there, it comes from out of this world?
Are there lots of things that like the thing you gave me, that are not of this world?
No, there are not a lot of those things. Those things
so
are
the
very...
caller's wrong when he says they find...
He talked about proof. Everybody's always demanding proof. Well, these are not necessarily things that we can easily prove. You're about to have a new baby, right?
You bet.
And,
maybe as we speak.
And I'm sure it's on your mind. The phone could ring. It could happen any time. And your wife, you love your wife.
Very much.
Prove it.
Prove I love her?
Yeah.
You don't know what I go through. She's the best.
That's a line from Contact.
And
but I mean, it goes.
It's no exception for me to love her, because
there you are. But I mean, if I were to demand proof.
Oh, well, prove there's electricity. I don't see the waves going through.
There you are. You can't. These are things you can't prove. It doesn't mean they're not real. It means you can't prove them.
How come the UFOs, which obviously have intelligence, I mean, they could stop in midair, they travel against gravity, they only go to Caracoca, Wyoming? Why don't they come to Times Square, Washington, L.A.? Well, you come to Beverly Hills, we buy it.
Here you are. when you go outside, when you walk outside, you'll look at traffic so that you don't have an accident. You look at the people that are looking at you. You look at it. When I came into the studio tonight, a policeman was going down the street drinking a cup of coffee, and his car was on fire. His car was on fire. Smoke billowing everywhere. Fire engines finally, 10 minutes later, screaming down. Well, this guy was just merrily going down the street drinking his coffee.
Starbucks commercial.
In other words, Larry, we don't pay attention to what's above us. We don't look up a lot, do we?
And in Pacacula, Wyoming, they do.
Well, occasionally you can't help it. You know, it may be the first alien contact that we think we had was in Roswell, and it was a crash. Now, where did that occur? That occurred near the 509th Bomb Group, and what did they do? They were the group that dropped what? The first atomic bomb. So if they are out there, when the mushroom clouds began forming, I think that would have got their attention. Don't you think?
I would say.
At that point, they would say, what are they doing down there?
When you do what you do and you talk to other people, you always talk to. I know you said earlier you were a reporter, but do you also become...
I'm not a reporter. I'm a talk show host.
Do you become conspiratorially oriented? A lot of talk show hosts live off it. I think he killed him. You know, they think Vince Foster.
A conspiracy is not the first thing that I leap to. Not the first possibility. I like jumping to the most logical possibility. And I hesitantly go to a conspiracy theories. But are there conspiracies? Oh, yes, of course there are. Sure.
Why are we so interested in the paranormal? You think?
Well, because, Larry, when we're done here on Earth, we all want to know that there's something else out there, don't we? And that is the land of the paranormal. And if there are ghosts, then that's proof that there's life after death, right?
So would you say the most unexplainable thing is death?
Of course it is.
The thing we know the least about. We have
and
faith.
The thing, as I said earlier, the thing we fear the most, the thing we quietly contemplate the most, of course it's death. Because cosmically, we're here not that long.
UFO spotters and conspiracy theorists may feel they live on the periphery of the mainstream, whatever that is, but there is one place they are welcomed with open arms. It's called Coast to Coast, and it's perhaps the most popular radio show you've never heard of. It's on when most of us are sleeping, when others' minds are racing, and all along, George Noory is there to listen without judgment to the voices coming out of the dark. Here's ABC's Brian Rooney.
From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world.
Hosted 5 nights a week by George Noory.
When I feel blue in the night.
It's radio for the night people, shift workers and truck drivers, people who are awake, thinking, in need of conversation.
2 months after he died, I saw him, and I go, Dad, is that you? Barack Obama. I've never trusted the man.
We are heading for civil war or revolution.
On the out-of-body experiences, how does a person get into that? I'm actually going to start a movement up here of trying to do away with property tax.
It is, he says, a show about mystery.
The search for Bigfoot, the question about UFOs, crop formations, are they real? I mean, we look at all of...
He says it's like sitting around a campfire roasting marshmallows.
You got Bigfoot, you have paranormal activity, you have UFOs, maybe government conspiracies or world government. Is there a thread that runs through that?
I think the thread is the big picture. Are we being manipulated by a shadow government? Are we being the puppets to the puppet masters? We'll have open lines for you. Here are the numbers.
Noory has been the host for 7 years now. He took over after the departure of the popular Art Bell, who made it primarily a show about UFOs and extraterrestrial life.
I deal with the strange, the unusual, the paranormal. Some time ago, I started listening. I'm a talk radio listener. I don't just do it, I listen.
Now, with Noory as host, the show goes out to 525 radio stations. Here's a caller who thinks he captured his dead mother on video.
And just a little bit over 2 seconds into the film, you go frame by frame as her face, just as plain as can be.
A little message from Mom, perhaps?
Yeah, and I'm telling you, it's just the most amazing thing.
His producer, Tom Danheiser, sits in the other room screening calls.
Okay, do me a favor, because I have a few minutes here. Get to the point. Okay, when's the last time you were on the show, Ziggy?
Norrie sometimes agrees with people, but you don't know if he's just making conversation. It's hard to pin down what he thinks.
For instance, you believe that there are forces that are larger than our government. What is that?
I don't name names, but there are people out there that you can imagine.
Do you have names?
Yeah, I have a few, but I don't reveal them on the air.
Bigfoot, real or imagined?
I would guess there's something that they're saying.
Alien abduction, does it really happen?
Millions of people across this planet are testifying that strange things are happening to them.
The global financial meltdown.
Awful. Done on purpose.
By who?
Again, these higher-ups. There is a push, it's my belief, that we are being pushed into a one-world government.
A small man. He is supposed to be of the leprechaun persuasion.
Are they mystical? Are they magical?
Yes. They were supposed to have knowledge.
A man was describing that he was an expert on gnomes and leprechauns. And pretty much your basic question was, oh, really, what do they look like?
You're not going to have me as the host put him down or go after him and crush him. As I could do if I was doing a daytime talk show, for example.
But for instance, on the Leprechaun Man, why not ask, well, really, what proof do you have?
Well, the proof was what he said. He saw them himself.
If I were to describe the thread that runs through almost all your topics, it is forces beyond our control.
And also forces that we just don't understand yet at this time.
So does that make those things real or part of our imagination?
Or maybe both.
Norrie says he's seen 2 UFOs himself, not definitely from outer space, but...
So you would say, at the least most likely, it was not of Earth?
I would say what I saw had the potential of being not from Earth. Very possible.
It's all up for discussion. Swine flu, made up by the drug companies? The federal bailout? Maybe a conspiracy? Out-of-body experience? People say it happens.
But I think we owe it to ourselves as people to question the bigger picture. Because if we don't, if we take everything at face value, I think we're all in a lot of trouble.
But until then, the unknown, the inexplicable, and the unlikely fill the airwaves of the night.
You're a wealth of information. Okay, we'll push it even harder. Rockets being designed to take them there. That is, if President Barack Obama gets his way. That's got to be one of the creepy ones.
This is Brian Rooney for Nightline in Los Angeles.
Well, I never knew I had Martians in my garden, and I never knew there were aliens on my roof. I got shadow people, and they're living in my basement. Got a funny feeling Bigfoot's gonna be here soon. I was so blind before, I was so unaware, but now I swear I'm seeing Sasquatch over there. I turned on my radio in the middle of the night, and I heard things I need to know. Now I can see the light, and I also see a ghost, 'cause I'm listening to Coast to Coast. Well, you never knew that your baby was a hybrid, but as he grew, you began to see the clues. Now you know the signs, 'cause you learned it from George Norrie. Even while you sleep, you got Martians watching you. I turned on my radio in the middle of the night, and I heard things I need to know. And I can see the light, and I also see a ghost, 'cause I'm listening to Coast to Coast. Good morning or good evening, wherever you may be, whichever world you're living in, whatever century, your voice is always welcome here on my radio. Call in with your space transmitter or your telephone. And I turned on my radio in the middle of the night, and I heard seen a light, and I also see a ghost. 'Cause I'm listening to Coast to Coast. 'Cause I'm listening to Coast to Coast.
The master of the macabre is returning to radio.
Yeah, late-night radio kingpin Art Bell, who started his career at a Las Vegas radio station before he became an international star, has been off the air for a few years, but is returning soon, not only to radio, but to a laundry list of offbeat topics that tend to bring in an avid rash of listeners from all around the world. Bell gave his only TV interview to a reporter who has worked with him over the years, the I-Team's George Knapp.
My favorite line from Contact is, "Want to take a ride?" Well, we're going to have a ride here.
The fact that Art Bell will be sitting in front of a microphone again, broadcasting from the Kingdom of Nye, is deliriously good news to his legions of fans all over the world. And it's fitting that his new show, Art Bell's Dark Matter, will be beamed to Earth via an extraterrestrial source, that is, satellite radio. Because for years, Bell fed and nurtured the public appetite for space aliens, abductions, ghosts, and things that go bump in the night. Topics which now dominate movies, cable, and the internet.
I love that stuff, and the world has changed only in the sense that what I did then is being done now times 10. Deep questions like life after death, is there any? UFOs, people from elsewhere, things from elsewhere, all of these things that we talk about, ghosts. They're all the same questions that were there when I was doing the broadcast, and those questions are there and bigger now. I suppose as you can see, I'm older. As we get older, we wonder more about these things. I certainly do.
Bell almost single-handedly reinvented late-night radio when, in the late 70s, he turned a political talk show on Las Vegas station KDAWN into a forum for the paranormal, covering topics long ignored by other media. The mysteries of Area 51, for example, time travel, climate change. Soon, his program was syndicated on more than 400 stations, with upwards of 12 million listeners.
If time travel is possible, then where are the time travelers?
And Bell, who says he has a face for radio, became a reluctant celebrity.
Had you heard about Art before? Was he famous?
He told me.
He told you he was famous?
Yes,
but you never heard of
him? No. And it's like nothing, not a big deal for me. And then finally, when we were in Manila, then that's when I realized, oh,
wait a second.
Okay.
Like it or not, his personal life is played out on the air. For a time, he lived in the Philippines. These days, he's back in Pahrump, in the same house where it all began, but has a new wife and young daughter, and soon a new show.
There's something about Pahrump, Nevada, that I love, and the desert that I love, George, and that I guess that never changes. I don't know. It's something in our air, it's something in our water, but we seem motivated to explore that which other people don't.
In the 90s, Bell stepped away from the airwaves after his son was victimized in a terrible crime. The program he'd created had morphed into Coast to Coast AM and carried on without him, primarily hosted by George Norrie. Bell returned as a part-timer, hosted a dozen or so programs each year, but left for good in 2010. Since then, he's been approached with other radio and TV offers, but turned them all down until Sirius XM knocked on the door. The new program will air in an earlier time slot each weeknight, so it's not directly up against Coast to Coast. Bell says there's plenty of room for both.
I think that a good show in this genre will raise all boats. And I also think competition is a good thing.
He plans to tackle familiar topics and chat with a stable of his favorite guests. The marching orders from the new network were pretty loose.
Just go on the air and have fun, and that's what I'm going to do.
From the Kingdom of Nye, George Knapp, 8 News Now.
Bell's program begins airing on the Indie station on Sirius XM in mid-September. For more information, we have links to his website on our website, 8newsnow.com. His former program, Coast to Coast AM, continues to do well. It is now carried on more than 550 radio stations. George Knapp is an occasional host on Sunday nights.